The moment Imani Rhodes stepped off the plane, the world seemed to narrow into slow motion. Not because of jet lag, she had managed to sleep a little during the flight from Zurich, and not because of the humid, heavy New York air that pressed through the glass walls of JFK International Airport, but because the feeling came again. That look. She could feel it before she saw it, like cold breath on the back of her neck. She adjusted the strap of her sand-colored travel tote and walked through the VIP exit gate reserved for business-class passengers. Her outfit was simple but refined: a cream blazer, tailored slacks, low-heeled mules, and her hair pulled into a neat bun. She looked like what she was, a young professional, fresh out of a top European MBA program, ready to return home and finally take a breather. But in places like this, dressed like that, moving the way she moved, confident but soft-footed, people didn't always see what she was. They saw who they thought she should be. And today, Officer Daniel Kruger saw someone who didn't fit. The terminal buzzed quietly in the background. Rolling suitcases, distant boarding calls, the smell of cinnamon pretzels, and overbrewed airport coffee. Passengers streamed toward baggage claim, heads down, earbuds in. But Kruger? He wasn't moving. He stood off to the right of the corridor, near a small security post that hadn't been staffed minutes ago when the other passengers exited. Now it was just him. A man in his 40s, white, broad-shouldered, clean-shaven, with a TSA badge clipped too tightly to his belt and a look in his eye that said, "I've decided you're a problem." Imani slowed, not because she was afraid, but because she knew this game. Knew it from airports, from high-end stores, from that one time at a luxury hotel in Milan when the concierge had double-checked her name twice. She exhaled slowly. Kruger stepped into her path. "Ma'am, I need you to step over here, please." Imani blinked once, steady. "Why?" "Routine screening," he said, gesturing to a small table with nothing on it but a clipboard and hand sanitizer. There was no scanner, no other officers, no visible equipment of any kind. She turned her head slightly. A teenage boy in an oversized hoodie walked past with no interruption. A white woman in yoga pants dragging 3 Louis Vuitton bags, untouched. Even the man behind her, who looked like he hadn't showered since Tuesday, waltzed by without a second glance. "Routine, right? I was already screened in Zurich," she said quietly. "I understand, but I need you to comply. Just a few questions." The word comply made her jaw clench. She stepped off to the side but didn't sit down. "You can ask them right here." "Name? Imani Rhodes," he scribbled on the clipboard. "Travel origin? Zurich, flight 1482. Business or pleasure? Business. I was presenting at a startup investment summit." "Interesting," he muttered, then glanced down at her boarding pass. "Business class?" She nodded. "Is that a problem?" she asked. "No," he said. "But then, just uncommon." "Uncommon for what?" He didn't answer, just stared a beat too long. That's how it always started, not with outright slurs or yelling, but with that micro moment of disbelief. That pause that says, "I wasn't expecting you." That subtle message. You don't belong in this tier. Not with that skin tone, not with that name. She'd spent years training herself not to bite back, not to give people like him the reaction they seemed to crave. So she took a deep breath and handed him her passport. "Italian passport?" he said, raising a brow. "Dual citizenship. I studied in Rome for 5 years." He flipped through the pages like he was looking for something that would give him permission to keep doubting her. He didn't find it. "You're pretty young to be traveling business class alone." She looked him dead in the eye. "I didn't realize it was age-restricted." He smirked. That little upturn of the mouth that said, "Go ahead. Get angry. Let me win." But Imani had grown up learning how to stay calm in a room built to provoke her. Her father had taught her, stillness is power, reserve is control. So she stood, still, silent. Kruger began circling, not physically, but with questions. "Who booked your ticket?" "My father." "What does he do?" "He's in the aviation industry." That was true, and vague, and entirely enough. "You always fly business?" "Sometimes. Depends." "Where are you staying?" "At my apartment in Soho." "Anyone picking you up?" "No, I'll take a car." He looked at her shoes, her bag, her posture, her stillness. Nothing about her made sense to him and made her dangerous. She felt the air shift around them. People were starting to notice. Not a crowd, just flickers of attention. A man near the juice bar paused mid-sip. A woman dragging a sleepy toddler lingered a second too long. Even a janitor slowed his mop stroke. Everyone could see something was off. No shouting, no tears, just tension, stretched like piano wire. And still, Kruger kept going. Where did you say you studied again? Rome. U.S. Business School. How long? 5 years. And you're a U.S. citizen? She held up her California driver's license, born and raised in Oakland. Kruger held her ID for a long time, flipping it over as if it were counterfeit. Finally, he gave it back, but not for adding one more line. Must be nice, huh? All these perks. She didn't answer. You know, he added, leaning just slightly forward, people who act like they're better than everyone else usually have something to hide. She almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so tired, so obvious, so deeply transparent. Better than everyone else? She echoed. You don't know anything about me. I've seen the type. No, she said evenly. You've decided I'm the type. Big difference. Then came the silence. That long humming pause before the pivot. Amani reached into her blazer pocket. Not fast, not threatening, just deliberate. She pulled out her phone and scrolled to a name in her favorites. The screen read, Dad, do not call unless urgent. She tapped it, once, then held the phone to her ear, eyes never leaving Kruger's. He chuckled. You gonna call a lawyer now, or your senator? She didn't answer. The phone rang, once, twice. Then, Z, you okay? A calm voice. Low, firm, authoritative. Daddy, she said softly but clearly. I'm at JFK Terminal 4, just landed. There's a TSA officer here who doesn't believe I belong in the VIP lane. There was a pause, heavy. Then, I'm on my way. She hung up, slipped the phone back in her pocket, folded her hands in front of her. Kruger smirked again, nervous this time. That's supposed to scare me? She raised one eyebrow. You'll find out. The silence after she ended the call wasn't loud, but it was heavy. Imani slipped her phone into the side pocket of her blazer and didn't say another word. She didn't need to. The energy had shifted. The kind of shift that didn't show up in headlines or handcuffs, but in posture, in breath, in the twitch just beneath someone's eye when control starts to slip. Officer Kruger stood opposite her, still trying to hold his ground, but the smug tilt of his shoulders was now paired with the faintest tremble in his jaw. He didn't know who she'd called, but he knew, deep down, that someone important was now aware of what was happening. And that changed everything. He cleared his throat, trying to reassert authority. Look, Miss Rhodes, this doesn't have to escalate. It's not escalating, she replied calmly. You're asking questions, I'm answering them. Then let's finish up. What's the purpose of your trip? Returning home. How long were you in Zurich? 4 days. Business? Yes. He scribbled notes he didn't need to take. The questions were less about information now, more about power, about not letting her walk away too easily. Who were you meeting with? Venture partners. Names, confidential. That one made him pause. She had boundaries, and he didn't like it. You always this careful? Imani tilted her head slightly. Only when someone's trying to corner me for no reason. The edge in her voice wasn't sharp. It was surgical. Controlled. Delivered with the kind of precision that made people uncomfortable because it refused to fit into the narrative they wanted. Kruger stepped in again. Not close enough to be inappropriate, but just enough to pressure. Just enough to say I'm still the one in charge here. Miss Rhodes, if you've got nothing to hide, then why am I still standing here when 20 people walked past without a word? He opened his mouth but nothing came out. Not right away. She folded her arms. Was it the outfit? The passport? Or just the fact that I don't match your idea of a business-class passenger? That hit. Right where it was meant to. Kruger bristled, but still tried to save face. Ma'am, you're being defensive. I'm being thorough, just like you. He stared at her. This wasn't going the way he expected. Most people, when cornered like this, especially young black women, were supposed to fold. Get flustered, get loud, give him a reason to call back up. But Imani? She stood like her spine was made of steel. And worse for him, people were noticing. A middle-aged man in a gray suit hovered nearby, pretending to check his phone but glancing up every few seconds. A younger woman in a Delta uniform paused on her way to the service desk. The energy in the terminal had changed. The temperature had dropped. The script was no longer his to control. Still, Kruger wasn't ready to let go. I'm not here to discriminate. I'm here to protect the integrity of this terminal. By profiling passengers who make you uncomfortable? I didn't say you made me uncomfortable. You didn't have to. The air between them thickened, and then he stepped back. Just half a step, not surrender, just recalibration. "What's your father's name?" he asked suddenly. Imani blinked. "Excuse me?" "The man you called, what's his name?" She didn't answer. "I'm sure if he's as important as you think he is, I'll recognize it." She held his gaze, calm, unmoving. "He'll introduce himself when he gets here." "That a threat?" She didn't even blink. "That's a schedule." At that exact moment, a woman in a navy blue blazer with an airport operations badge approached them. She moved quickly, efficiently. No hesitation. Her eyes scanned the scene in seconds. Her badge read S. Mahoney, Terminal Admin. "Is everything all right here?" "I have it under control," Kruger said without even looking at her. "I wasn't asking you," she said, cutting him off. She turned to Imani. "Ma'am, are you okay?" Imani nodded. "I'm fine, just trying to collect my bags and go home." "Was there an incident?" Imani hesitated. "Just a pattern I've seen before, that's all." Mahoney's eyes narrowed slightly. She looked at Kruger, then back at Imani. "Do you feel unsafe?" "No, but I feel scrutinized without cause." "Thank you," Mahoney said, then stepped slightly to the side and tapped something into her radio. Kruger looked nervous now, not panicked, but unsure of what Mahoney had just communicated. He shifted his stance again. Arms crossed now, lips tight. A voice crackled back over Mahoney's walkie. "Confirmed. The passenger cleared international security. No alerts, no flags, nothing outstanding." She turned to Kruger. "Then I believe we're done here." "With respect, I was performing routine screening, without authorization, or equipment, or backup, and you picked a lone woman with no probable cause." The tone in her voice was cool but cutting, like ice on glass. Kruger opened his mouth, but a loud whoosh interrupted him as the sliding glass doors to the terminal parted. Two black SUVs pulled up directly in front of the VIP pickup zone. The lead vehicle's rear door opened, and a tall man stepped out. Imani smiled, just slightly, but it was real. The man's presence was quiet but commanding. He didn't wear arrogance, he wore certainty. A tailored charcoal suit, silver cufflinks, a muted navy tie, close-cropped salt and pepper hair, smooth stride. Not fast, but purposeful. He didn't scan the crowd, he didn't ask questions, he walked straight toward his daughter. Kruger's entire demeanor shifted. Who is that?" Mahoney didn't answer at first. She didn't need to. Imani did. "That's my father." Kruger's eyes widened. He swallowed hard. "Wait, Rhodes? Rhodes, like..." Imani didn't respond, but Mahoney did. "That's Charles Rhodes," she said quietly, "chairman of Rhodes Aviation Group, one of the 3 private shareholders in this terminal." Kruger took a half step back, like the truth had weight, like the realization had hit a nerve. Imani watched him, calm as ever. "You said I didn't look like someone who belonged in business class," she said softly. "Turns out you don't look like someone who can lose his job either, but here we are." Charles Rhodes approached the group. He didn't speak right away. He looked at his daughter. She looked back. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "You all right?" "I am now?" He nodded, then turned to Kruger. No handshake, no pleasantries, just a firm, assessing stare. "The one who stopped my daughter?" Kruger stiffened. "Sir, I was just following routine." "Routine doesn't involve isolating single women of color with no cause. Not in my terminal, not under my watch." Mahoney stepped in. "Mr. Rhodes, I've already requested a full report from TSA and Terminal Ops. I'll personally follow up with your team. See that you do." Then back to Kruger. "Your badge gives you authority, not permission to discriminate. You don't get to question someone's presence because it challenges your bias." Kruger didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. Rhodes turned to his daughter. "Let's go." As they walked toward the exit, past the frozen crowd, past the baggage claim that now felt miles away, Imani exhaled, not in relief, in release. She didn't look back, didn't need to. Behind them, Mahoney pulled Kruger aside and spoke in hushed tones, and just like that, the balance of power had shifted. Not with shouting, not with anger, but with truth and presence. Charles Rhodes didn't walk like a man arriving at a scene. He walked like a man reclaiming a room that had always been his. Imani followed half a step behind him, her eyes scanning the faces around them. Most were already pretending to look away, phones raised slightly but screens dark, earbuds in but no music playing. It was the kind of attention people gave when they didn't want to be seen watching, but couldn't help themselves. Kruger remained frozen. posture stiff, as if he'd just remembered every wrong thing he'd said in the past 15 minutes, and realized they all might matter now. Charles didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The air shifted around him. A man in an airport manager's uniform jogged from the opposite end of the terminal. Sweat dotted his brow, though the air conditioning was set low. He reached the group, stopped, and adjusted his badge. D. Alvarez, Terminal Operations Chief. "Mr. Rhodes," Alvarez said, out of breath. "We had no idea you were inbound. I would have arranged private clearance." "I didn't come here for a tour," Charles said, not looking at him. His eyes stayed on Kruger. "Officer Daniel Kruger," Mahoney added quietly, stepping slightly to the side. Charles finally addressed him directly. "You're who decided my daughter didn't look like she belonged?" Kruger's lips moved before any sound came out. "Sir, it's protocol, routine international screening." "Really?" Charles said, voice still calm. "So the half-dozen passengers before her, walking out unchecked, were what? Invisible?" "They were. What? Whiter, older, less polished, or just less threatening to your ego?" Kruger opened his mouth, but Charles cut in. "You know the thing about quiet power, Officer Kruger? It doesn't need to posture. It doesn't require a uniform or a podium behind a badge." He stepped closer. Still not threatening, still not loud, but every inch of him radiated weight. "It walks into a room and the room rearranges itself." Alvarez cleared his throat again, this time nervous. "Sir, we're going to debrief Officer Kruger internally. A full write-up will be initiated." "Initiated?" Charles turned slightly. "No. You'll start it now." He turned back to Mahoney. "I want a full review of security footage from the last 30 minutes at this gate, every checkpoint, every interaction he had with passengers." Mahoney nodded once, briskly. "Already requested. And legal will follow up by tomorrow morning. We'll be requesting access logs, body cam data if available, and your official non-discrimination protocol." "Understood." Charles exhaled, slow, controlled. Then finally to Kruger. "You had no reason to stop her. No cause, no complaint, just a look." Kruger shuffled, then tried. "She didn't match the manifest." "The manifest?" Charles repeated. "You read manifests now?" Because that's interesting, considering you're not part of the airline staff, not trained in guest relations, not even cleared to make passenger assessments post-customs. I was just doing my job." "No," Charles said. "You were flexing your badge, because you could, because no one usually stops you, because no one usually can." That line landed like a dropped stone in still water, and everyone felt the ripple. A voice came from the side. "Mr. Rhodes?" It was a young black TSA agent, nervous, clearly junior, but standing tall. Her name tag read C. Manning. She stepped forward from behind the desk, glancing at Kruger, then back at Charles. "I saw the stop. It wasn't procedure. We're supposed to have scanners for secondary screenings. None were requested. None were set up." Charles nodded once. "And you are?" "Agent Chloe Manning, sir." "Thank you for speaking up, Agent Manning. It matters." Kruger's jaw twitched. "So now what?" he muttered. "I get fired for doing my job?" "You get held accountable for forgetting what your job is." Charles said. "This is political," Kruger snapped. Charles stepped in, very close now, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is personal." The moment held. Kruger blinked. His gaze dropped, just for a second, but it was enough. Charles turned and walked back toward Imani, who had stayed silent the entire time. Not because she was scared, but because she'd already said everything that needed to be said. She watched her father with a mix of pride and heartbreak. Pride, because he moved like a force. Heartbreak, because he still had to. Behind them, Alvarez pulled Mahoney aside. "He's going to want heads." "He's not wrong," she said. "We'll review, but we'll need to prep a statement. Keep it factual, no fluff. This isn't PR, it's protocol." They nodded. As Charles and Imani walked toward the exit, Alvarez rushed to keep pace. "Sir, we can offer a private lounge while your team prepares the next steps." "We're not staying." "Transportation? Anything we can arrange?" "It's already handled." Just then, Imani's phone buzzed. A text, from a number she didn't recognize. She glanced at it, then another, then 10 more. Notifications filled her screen like a flood. Screenshots, mentions, a short clip, from someone in the terminal. The video, it was already out. Imani's breath caught for a second. She opened the clip, watched herself standing still, arms folded, watched Kruger press in, watched her call her father, watched him arrive. The caption on the post, When you mess with the wrong one, her dad owns the terminal. Thousands of views. Already. Charles caught a glimpse of the screen. It's out? Yeah. Let it circulate. Won't that complicate things? Maybe, but silence never helped us. They reached the waiting SUV. The driver opened the door. Charles nodded toward it but didn't get in. Z, he said, walk with me. She looked at him, confused. Now? They walked past the car, down the sidewalk, away from the terminal buzz. Just two shadows cutting through the setting sun. You okay? Yes. No, I don't know. You held your ground. I'm tired of having to. He nodded. I know. I did everything right, Dad. I didn't talk back. I stayed calm. I played the part, and still. They didn't see the part. They saw the package. They reached the far edge of the curb where no one else was. She turned to face him. When does it stop? He looked out at the cars speeding past. When we make it stop. And if we can't? He turned back to her. Then we keep standing, until they're forced to sit down. She exhaled. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a small black, handed it to her. She opened it. Inside, a letter, formal, stamped, addressed to Imani Rhodes. From the Board of Rhodes Aviation. What is this? Your appointment as VP of International Development. She stared. I thought. You earned it, and today you proved why you're ready. She blinked back tears. Back in the terminal, Kruger was led quietly into a side office. Outside, the sun dipped behind the city skyline, and a new chapter was already being written. The house was quiet. Imani stood in the middle of the sunken living room, barefoot, her bag still by the door. The floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Manhattan skyline like a postcard. Perfect, distant, untouchable. She didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, letting the stillness wrap around her like a blanket she hadn't realized she needed. It had only been a few hours since the terminal. Only a few since her father's voice sliced through Officer Kruger's assumptions like a scalpel. Since the balance of power had shifted, not violently, not loudly, but completely. And still, something inside her felt unsettled. She padded into the kitchen, opened the fridge, and stared at its contents as if answers might live in the empty shelves and a half-finished bottle of oat milk. She poured herself a glass of water, sipped once, then set it down untouched on the marble counter. Then she sat. Not with grace, not with intention. She just folded. Onto the edge of the kitchen stool, spine curled slightly forward, arms slack in her lap. Her blazer was still crisp, her blouse unwrinkled, her makeup held. But inside, she felt undone. She replayed it in her mind, the questions, the tone, the way Kruger hadn't needed to yell to make his point, because it wasn't about what he said. It was about how he saw her. Or didn't. The way he looked at her and saw not a Wharton graduate, not a startup founder, not the vice president of anything, but a problem to be interrogated. That, more than anything, was the weight pressing against her chest now. The door opened quietly behind her. Charles entered, carrying 2 takeout bags. He didn't say anything at first, just walked to the kitchen, set them down, and began unpacking without fanfare. Soup containers, grilled chicken salad, warm bread. I didn't know what you'd feel like eating, he said simply. She didn't answer. He glanced at her, then pulled out a stool and sat across from her. I was thinking about something, he said. Still no response. When I was your age, I had to carry a letter from my dean in my pocket just to get into certain buildings. Didn't matter that I was a student. Didn't matter that I had a scholarship. They saw me coming, and they assumed I was lost. She looked up then, quiet, but listening. One day, he continued, a guard at a bank told me I wasn't allowed to use the lobby restroom, said it was for clients. I was there to sign documents. I was the client, but that didn't matter to him. What did you do? She asked, voice barely audible. I used the restroom, he said, a hint of humor under the steel. Then I bought the building 5 years later. Imani almost smiled. Almost. You were incredible today, she whispered. The way you handled it, how calm you were. You were calm. No, she shook her head. I wasn't calm. I was composed. That's not the same thing. It is for people watching, but not to me. She rubbed her temples, suddenly exhausted. I keep thinking, what if I had reacted? What if I'd gotten loud, cried, demanded respect instead of quietly waiting for it to be returned? Charles leaned forward. Then you would have still been my daughter. You would have still been right. She looked at him, eyes glassy. But I would have been wrong to them. He said nothing, just let the silence settle. After a moment, she stood, walked to the window, looked out. Her reflection stared back, blurred slightly by city lights behind her. She didn't recognize her posture. Her shoulders looked tired. Her stance, tentative. "Do you think it's always going to be like this?" she asked. "That no matter how far I go, I'll still be reduced to what I look like when I walk into a room?" "I think some rooms will try." "Then why do we bother?" He stood beside her now, hands in his pockets. "Because some of us don't get the luxury of not bothering." She didn't respond. "And because walking into that room," he added, "is part of what changes it." She turned to him. "Did it ever get easier for you?" He laughed, soft, honest. "No, I just got better at seeing it coming." She stared at him. "That's not comforting." "It wasn't meant to be. It's meant to be honest." They stood in silence a moment longer. Then she turned and walked back to the kitchen. Sat again, this time a little straighter. "What if I don't want to be that person?" she said suddenly. "What person?" "The symbol, the daughter, the quiet proof that we belong here too." "Then don't." "But what if people look at me that way anyway?" "Then let them. You don't have to carry their misunderstanding." She ran a hand down her arm, as if brushing off invisible weight. "You gave me that VP letter today like it was some kind of next step, like I'm ready. Because you are. But I don't feel ready. I feel cracked." He nodded slowly. "Good." That caught her off guard. "Good?" "Cracks let the light in." She stared at him for a long moment, then finally, let out a full breath. They ate quietly after that. No grand discussions, no forced pep talks, just two people refueling after surviving something invisible but heavy. After dinner, Charles stepped out to take a call. Imani lingered at the table, hands wrapped around a warm mug, staring into nothing. Her phone buzzed again. New messages, surely, but she didn't reach for it. Not yet. Not tonight. Tonight wasn't about explaining, or defending, or reacting. It was about breathing. Later, alone in her room, she sat at her desk, opened her laptop, pulled up a blank document, typed a single line. What does it mean to belong in a space that questions your presence? She stared at it, then deleted it. Typed another. I am not an exception. I am a fact. She left that one, closed the laptop, and finally allowed herself to cry. Not out of defeat, but release, a quiet fallout, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of something whole. 3 days later, Imani Rhodes sat by the window of her apartment, wrapped in a gray cotton robe, watching the city move without her. The sun hadn't fully risen yet. It hung just below the skyline, casting soft orange light across the edges of high-rises and brownstones. The streets were starting to breathe. A trash truck rattled down 9th Avenue. A jogger in neon gear ran past without looking up. Inside, the apartment was silent. The kind of silence that asks you to listen to yourself. She'd been doing a lot of that lately. The incident at JFK had passed, or at least the moment had. But the memory hadn't. It hovered quietly between moments. In the way her shoulders tensed when she walked through a store. In the pause she felt before entering a meeting room. In the way her fingers hovered just above the keyboard before typing a name, her name on a public document. The world had moved on, but her spirit hadn't yet. And she was okay with that. Some things weren't meant to be rushed. Her laptop was open, the screen still blank. She'd been asked, by a colleague, a friend, even her father, to consider writing a statement. Not a press release. Not an op-ed. Just a note. Her truth. Nothing fancy. She'd resisted at first. Not because she didn't know what to say, but because she wasn't sure if she wanted to say it. Was it her job to make people understand? Was it her burden to teach them what dignity looks like? Wasn't just living it enough? But something in her chest said, maybe it's not for them. Maybe it's for you. She closed her eyes and let herself remember. Not the part with the officer. Not even the part when her father showed up. But the moment right after. That strange stillness in the air. The way her hands had stayed steady, even when her heart hadn't. The way she didn't raise her voice, didn't shrink. The way she looked a uniformed man in the eye and said, without saying, I don't need to prove anything. I am already enough. That was the moment she kept coming back to. That was the moment that mattered. Her fingers moved slowly across the keys. 3 days ago, I landed in New York after a business trip and was pulled aside by a man in uniform who looked at me and decided I didn't belong. She paused. I did everything right. I was respectful. I complied. I answered questions. And still, I was treated like a suspect, not a traveler. Like a threat, not a daughter coming home. She stared at the screen, then kept typing. It wasn't the first time I'd felt that look, and it probably won't be the last. But here's what I've learned. You don't fight ignorance by explaining yourself over and over again. You don't dismantle assumptions by debating them. You simply keep standing in your truth, in your presence, in your stillness. She saved the document, didn't hit post. Not yet, because this wasn't about going viral. It wasn't about clapping back. It wasn't even about winning. It was about reclaiming something. Her time, her voice, her space, her power. That afternoon, she met her father for lunch. Not in a boardroom, not in a suite, just a cafe on the Upper West Side, the kind with mismatched chairs and a server who called everyone Han. Charles was already there, sipping tea and reading the paper. "You look rested," he said as she sat down. "I slept for 10 hours. That's progress." They smiled. No tension, no performance, just a father and daughter finally exhaling. Midway through the meal, Charles folded his napkin. "I read something once," he said, "that stuck with me." "Yeah?" It said, "If you're always trying to prove you're good enough, you've already forgotten that you are." Imani leaned back in her chair. "Then I've been forgetting for a long time." "You remembered the other day. Only because you showed up." "No," he said gently, "because you stood your ground before I got there. It didn't feel brave. That's because courage never does in the moment." She stared into her tea. "Do you ever wish it wasn't always about proving? Every day. Then how do you keep going?" He smiled. "Because every time I walk into a room and don't shrink, I'm reminding the room what strength looks like. Even when they don't want to see it, especially when they don't want to see it." They didn't say much after that. They didn't need to. Later that night, back in her apartment, Imani opened her laptop again. She didn't rewrite her statement. She didn't soften it. She just added one more line. "Let them talk, but when you speak, make it true." Then she hit post and closed the laptop, not with a dramatic slam, but with peace. As the screen dimmed, she turned toward the window. The skyline shimmered under the night sky. For once, she didn't feel like she had to explain herself to it, or to anyone. Her presence was her proof.